Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description and every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 4, Episode 2 of HBO's Succession, entitled Rehearsal. This episode title seems to revolve around the wedding dinner rehearsal that we see in this episode, well, it takes place in this episode, we don't see it, but it has a pretty big impact on Connor, and I thought this was an interesting episode for Connor because he's always seemed kind of like aloof and weird. You know, I've always joked with my wife. I always say like, I'm Connor. I don't give a fuck about nothing going on here. But he doesn't really seem to care. He never has. Really seem to care about being involved in the family stuff. But he does still want the money, of course. But then he kind of seems like out of touch, you know, like with the presidential stuff and with the nature of the transactional nature of his relationship with Willa. Like he just seems kind of like blissfully unaware or intentionally oblivious to a whole lot of things. You know, he seems kind of a bit of a dullard, you know, but Connor seems very broken in this episode. And I thought it was an interesting decision to show us Willa leaving the rehearsal so we could see her demeanor. And side note, I thought that actress did a really great job in that scene of put on a good face for the siblings, but I'm definitely dealing with something. Like, she conveyed that, I think, really, really, really well in that scene. Like, I could tell something had just happened, and I thought that was good. But, like I said, I thought it was an interesting decision to show us Willa leaving the rehearsal so we could see her demeanor, and to show us Connor's kind of like, I guess, apathetic reaction to it, but then to not show us the event and the meltdown itself. And I found myself wondering, why wouldn't they have shown us that? And I think generally, you know, when you watch a lot of stuff and when you do a lot of these sorts of things, like these videos, these breakdowns, you really look into these shows and you think about why. I think when you watch a show and you ask yourself why a show has or does not have certain scenes, or why they made the decision that they made, it can really inform you, I think, on the show's intentions. And, you know, I think we didn't see Willa's breakdown because the show's intention isn't to go, hey, look, you guys, Willa isn't all in on this marriage. Like, no shit. We know that. Like, that's very clear to everyone but Connor, you know, how not in on this wedding Willa is. And actually, I'm gonna take back that everyone's aware but Connor. I think Connor's aware too, but we're gonna talk about Connor. Anyway, we know that. We've known that for a very long time. So if we see Willa break down during the speech, what do we really learn new from that situation? Like, did we learn anything new about Willa? No, I don't think we did. However, seeing Connor's reaction to it gave us new information on Connor, did it not? You know, when he's talking to his siblings, he's like, you know, no big deal, she'll be back, whatever. Like, he seemed very kind of just, this isn't a big deal. Yeah, the way he even said it, he was downplaying it. He's like, yeah, she said something, you know, she was doing her speech. She said, I can't take this. She walked off. You know, he said, like I said, he was downplaying. But he again seemed almost oblivious to how big of a deal this was. And that's what it felt like to me in that moment. It felt like regular fucking Connor, right? Someone who just doesn't quite understand the gravity of what's happening. But, it's kind of like how I said a moment ago. I'm like, Connor doesn't understand, that Willa's lack of interest in this wedding. I think I learned in this episode, Connor understands a lot more than I think he does. And Connor cares, I don't want to say about less, but he doesn't care about the things that you would think people would think he cares about. That makes sense. Like, I think what Connor cares about is different than what everyone else cares about. And everyone else cares about shit that Connor don't give a fuck about. But like I said, we're going to keep talking about this. So what does Connor do? He spends the rest of the night watching Willa's location on his phone. And he's just looking at his phone. He's being all depressed, following her around. The siblings ultimately succumb to this request that he has to do karaoke. And after the scene with Logan at the karaoke bar, which obviously we're going to talk about that, Connor has a great speech that I want to quote directly. I don't know if you call it a speech, but it's a couple of sentences. The good thing, I'm starting to quote now. The good thing about having a family that doesn't love you is you learn to live without it. You're all chasing after dad saying, love me, please love me. I need love. I need attention. You're needy love sponges. I'm a plant that grows on rocks and lives off insects that die inside of me. If Willa doesn't come back, that's fine because I don't need love. It's like a superpower. And if she comes back and doesn't love me, that's okay too because I don't need it. That's such a sad thing to hear and a sad thing for someone to say to their siblings. Like, even, like, I removed, like, Shiv's reactions during that quote to make it all one quote. But Shiv kind of reacts like, come on, Connor, like, what are you talking about? But you feel for Connor in that moment. And then he returns home after basically saying, I don't give a fuck what Willa does. And Willa's there in the bed already, still awake. She pulls his arm around her. They turn over. And he don't even say shit. Like, he doesn't make her talk about leaving the rehearsal. He doesn't ask her where she's been. He doesn't say, hey, I was watching you on your phone. I saw you hit the aquarium. Like, he doesn't say anything. Like, all the weird places her phone went where I'm wondering, like, what the fuck is Will up to? He don't ask. And he doesn't ask. Well, we don't find out what Willa was up to at all that time, during that time period, the karaoke time period, just like we didn't see the speech meltdown. And I'm okay with that because Connor is okay with that. Connor doesn't care what she's been up to. And so why should I care? And to break that down a little bit further, this tells me that what Connor said is true. He really doesn't care. It could go either way. If she hadn't been there, he probably would have been cool. She was, and he was probably happy about that. But he doesn't care if she's there despite not wanting to be, which anyone else would care about that. Like, do you actually want to be here with me? Anyone else would care about that. Connor don't care about that. Like he said, he doesn't need love. She's there, and the show can go on as planned, and that's really all he cares about. Now, I do still believe he cares about Willa. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think he's just like, yeah, I don't give a fuck about Willa. It just lets me know that her love of him, he can do with it or without it. He'd probably, of course, prefer to be with it, of course. But if she's present and the love isn't there, that's okay with him too. And that's a lot, I think, for me to learn about Connor in this episode this week. And I just thought that was really interesting. I found Connor to be a lot more sympathetic in this episode, kind of sad. And whereas normally I've kind of felt like, Connor don't care, so why would I care? But like now it's like Connor almost feels like you feel bad for him. It's like he doesn't naturally not care. Like his reason for not caring is like, yeah, when your family doesn't love you, that's just what happens. It's like, that's sad. But I just thought it was interesting that everything that happened with Willa, we didn't see it because we didn't need to see it because Connor doesn't need to see it. Nobody needs to know where she went, why she went there, how she felt, how she feels now. Only thing that matters is that she was there and she pulled his arm over him. That's all he cares about. And I thought that was really, really interesting and really informing on the Connor character. The other big thing I want to address from this episode is obviously the situation with Logan and the kids. And to be clear, when I say the kids, I'm talking about Roman, Shiv, and Connor. Roman, Shiv, and Kendall, sorry. I want to break down and kind of summarize everything that's happening here just to get us on the same page, because we need to be clear on the details of what's happening in order to talk about what Logan and the kids are up to, and for me to just kind of like pose questions. Like my big question coming out of this is, why do you think Kendall did what he did? And you might be sitting here wondering, what did Kendall do? So like that's what I'm getting at, because I thought this was a very convoluted sequence, and I feel like we kind of need to when I say sequence, I mean the sequence of Stewie and Sandy approaching the kids with their proposition and everything that kind of played out from that. I thought it was a little kind of tough to follow, especially given that everyone has motivation. So I just kind of felt like it's time to kind of like revisit what's going on, the deals that are in play, all that kind of stuff, so we can be crystal clear on what happened in this episode, and then we could talk about it. So that sounded like I would be talking for like 45 minutes. It's not. It's really simple, but I just wanted to go over it again. So if you remember at the end of last season, the plan is for Lucas Madsen, who is played by Alexander Skarsgård of Gojo, to buy Waystar Royco. Now, Logan is keeping ATN, which is, if you recall, that's the news branch, the news channel that is part of Waystar Royco. It's very similar to when Disney bought most of Fox. Rupert Murdoch kept Fox News. He kept like the Fox TV channel. I actually read the other day, this is kind of random, the reason that Disney was unable to acquire Fox, the TV channel, it wasn't because Rupert Murdoch said you can't have Fox. It was because apparently one entity can't own two broadcast networks, and Disney already owns ABC. So I thought that was interesting. Didn't know that. Anyway, once the sale of Waystar to Gojo / Madsen, to be clear, also, the show uses those terms interchangeably. Gojo and Madsen, same thing. The Gojo deal, the Madsen deal. Anytime they say that, they're referring to Madsen's purchase of Waystar Royco. Once that sale's complete, everyone should be cashed out and fucking happy. Not just our people. All the board members of Waystar, including Stewie. Why do I keep calling him Stewie? It's because I like Sandy and Stewie. I kind of want to merge them together and to make Stewie. But anyway, Stewie, Sandy, her dad, all the kids, everybody's cashed out and good if this deal happens. And also, as we learned last week, the kids plan on using their portion of the money that they're going to get out of that sale to buy Pierce. All right, so we remember that from last week. Side note, the kids are watching Pierce's news channel, PGN, at the beginning of this episode, and they're like shitting on it and the content, and they're like spitballing ideas for what should be on there. And Kendall says something like an all Africa news channel. He's like, I'd watch that shit. I'm like, no, you wouldn't watch. Nobody would watch that. People in Africa wouldn't watch that. Nobody's watching Africa news, Kendall. Like, I don't know. I just thought that was funny. Like, why would you throw out an all Africa news channel? It's such pandering, but it's exact. Like, I feel like that would happen in real life because it's such a pandering ass move. I feel like somebody would throw that out in a real news meeting. Like, what if we have an all Africa thing? You know, black people like Africa. Like, no, ain't nobody watching that shit, Kendall included. But like I said, once the sale is complete, everybody's smooth. So they're approached by Stewie and Sandy, yes, to essentially team up with them and collectively say no to Madsen buying Waystar, which forces Logan to go back to the bargaining table. And because they all collectively agree there's more money to be gotten out of Madsen. We can get more. Now, a brief kind of personal side note here. I am personally questioning if the true motivation is that they think Madsen is fucking them over and they can get more money, or if Stewie and Sandy are up to something else. I don't know. It's me kind of like conditioned to read in between the lines on this show and to kind of like think that everyone's got some kind of underlying motivation. It's not on the screen that they're up to anything else, but it's in my head, so I'm just wondering. And I'm putting it out there in case they are. Yeah, I can go back and be like, hey, I said that they were up to something after episode 2. But anyway, a downside of this that only matters to Roman is how much fucking with this deal, and potentially fucking the deal altogether, because of course the real threat is if we say no to the deal right now on the point of price and say, hey, we think we can get more, maybe Madsen walks and now Waystar Royco doesn't get sold at all, nobody gets all their money, everything goes differently, right? So, like I said, a downside of this that only matters to Roman is how much fucking over the deal is going to upset Logan. It's a downside for Roman, but it's a big upside to Kendall and Shiv. And when it's initially brought to them, Shiv seems interested, but we already know Shiv is interested. I think in a prior scene, we had seen her call Sandy and say, like, yeah, you know, I'm kind of actually now interested in what you mentioned again. Like, yeah, it'll piss my dad or whatever. But I think it's worth thinking about. Like, she makes pissing off Logan sound like an afterthought, whereas for me, to me, it feels like it's Shiv's primary motivation. And we're going to talk about that in a moment as well. But Shiv seems interested. Roman and Kendall don't. However, during karaoke, Kendall gets a call from Matsson, who says exactly what everyone is suspicious of and wondering about. He says that if he gets any more pushback, he's out. He's like, don't fuck with me. He's like, if you push one more time, he ain't gonna be selling the company to me. This leads me to the first thing I wanted to discuss about this particular plot line. Not only is it interesting to me that Kendall didn't say anything during karaoke about Matsson having told him that he's gonna walk, but it's almost like once Matsson said that, Kendall went from being less interested in pushing back to more interested in pushing back. That's what's kind of like, I don't want to say throwing me off, but I'm wondering why that made Kendall more interested. I mean, of course, to me, it feels like obviously the motivation of fucking Logan over is interesting. But like as soon as he got off that call, he then texted Stewie and he's like, send me those comparables. And Stewie sends it over. And initially when I watched it, I'm like, I don't know what this means. When I watched it again, in the initial meeting with Stewie and Sandy, I have to really focus on saying that. In that initial meeting, Stewie says something like, look at the comparables. He's like, it's basically his way of saying, look at the comparables. Matsson is shorting us on price. So when Kendall now, after talking to Matsson, says, let me see those comparables again, it's like his way, it's like the show's way of telling us that Kendall has now reconsidered Stewie's position. And he's like, is Matsson shorting us on price? Let me see. And I'm wondering if Matsson saying that had the opposite effect on Kendall, just strictly from a business sense, where he's like, oh, okay, now I'm suspicious. Or if it's just kind of more like, oh, I see this as an opportunity to fuck dad. So I don't know Kendall's motivations right now. I'm curious what you guys think about it. But it kind of reads to me like Kendall is now believing that maybe they are being shorted on price, but also he wants to fuck over his father. Two birds, one stone kind of deal here. And then also of note, if you guys don't know what comparables are in general, but comparables are generally like, okay, let's say Matsson's buying Gojo for $50 billion. I don't even know if they've set a price on the show or if it's some kind of secret. I don't know. So if they have set a price and I'm wrong about it, whatever. It doesn't change anything. But let's say it's $50 billion, right? When he says, like, let me see comparables, it's going to be like, okay, this company that does this kind of business sold for this amount. This company that did this kind of business sold for this amount. They're all going to be companies similar to Waystar Royco. So the point is, hey, look, companies similar to Waystar Royco sold for $60 billion. Matsson's only offering you 50. What the fuck? So that's what the comparables thing is. Let's see, where am I now? Oh, and then also to that point, the point of potentially being willing to risk losing the sale to Gojo altogether. The point of buying Pierce in the first place was to fuck over Logan by buying something he was after for so long. But if they can fuck him over even better by fucking the Waystar sale altogether, I think that's kind of like a good motivation for them too. So my initial thought was like, why would they risk losing that sale? Because then they can't buy Pierce. But I think Pierce is kind of like plan B. It's kind of like, okay, if this is already going to happen, let's fuck with him and buy Pierce. We know he likes Pierce. Let's do that. And also they're still probably mad about the whole thing at the end of season 3, how he stopped them from doing what they were going to do because of Tom's help, all that good shit, whatever. But it just makes me wonder if I was wrong in thinking why would you do that? Now you're gonna fuck over your ability to buy Pierce, and it's really more of like, wait, if we can fuck the sale all together, that's way better than than fucking Pierce. Fucking him over on Pierce. And I think they needed that loop in of Sandy and Stewie to kind of be like, okay, now we can do something here, which they probably wouldn't have been able to do on their own, just the three of them. So, but like I said, I'm interested in discussing the motivations here. And actually, let's talk about it a little bit further. Kendall runs off a few at karaoke, not paying attention to Connor, hitting Roman, putting Connor's mom in a mental institution. But for Kendall personally, we've already seen what's happened between him and Logan throughout the course of the entire show's run. So no point in running off a list. But we, of course, know why Kendall would want to fuck over Logan. That's for sure. Shiv, in addition to everything else we've already seen, also learned that Logan has coached Tom into how to fuck over his own daughter in divorce proceedings. Tom has created a conflict of interest with all the divorce lawyers so that Shiv can't get one. And it's the same thing Logan did to her mom. And that's how she know he learned it from Logan. So now Shiv has even an additional motivation to fuck over Logan. And then lastly, there's Roman. We know he's the one with the least amount of spine and who is Logan's neediest love sponge. So of course he's going to be opposed, right? He doesn't want to stay in conflict with his dad. But what I like about Roman is that he also seems the most in touch with reality. He does understand that this is a pretty perfect deal. Everyone can get what they want and walk away if they just drop their greed or their personal desire to fuck over Logan Roy. And this is something that I think Shiv and Kendall don't quite understand. Like in the karaoke meeting, when Logan is explaining the stakes, he's like, if they push back on Matsson, he's gonna walk. And we know this to be true because we just saw Matsson tell that to Kendall directly. What Matsson may or may not do has been speculated on, but we know it. We know what it is, and we know that Kendall knows what it is. Shiv's like, you don't know that, you're just gaslighting us, and Kendall doesn't say anything. And they tell him to ask Matsson for more money, and he's like, why? And in that moment, I just thought, this is it right here. Because that's the big, I think, at least for me, elephant in the room kind of question that I had for the whole episode. Because like I said, I thought, like, why would you risk fucking over the Pierce deal to do this? And it's like, do they think this is the right play? Or do they just want to fuck over Logan that badly? And that was a question that I think is unclear up to this point. So when Logan asked why they should ask for more money, I'm thinking, okay, they're going to sell me on why this is the good business decision that they've claimed it to be. And then Shiv is just like, gut feeling. Kendall is like, to increase our money pile. And I'm like, okay, so you don't have a good reason to push back, and you can't even give a good fake one to cover up your own personal desire to fuck over Logan. So when Logan says, I love you, but you're not serious people, he's right. They're not. They're fucking a colossal financial deal for solely personal reasons. And that's just not something a serious person does. At the same time, there's got to be a part of you that goes, can you blame him? Like, Logan's in there asking them to commit to a deal that benefits him and them, admittedly, but he's struggling to even get through this whole apology thing. And what I liked about the apology stuff is the ambiguity of the authenticity. Like, I don't know, like, what did you guys think about Logan, the apology portion of the discussion? Like, did you think it was authentic? Do you think he's just trying to get them to buy? I mean, do you think he's trying to get them to go along with the Gojo deal? Or is it both? You know, I lean toward both. I think he really was trying to connect with his kids in that moment. He really does love them. I think even part of the reason that Carrie was there was because he might have wanted her to convey ideas that he's like too curmudgeonly to convey himself. Like, did you notice how she would step in and say very specific things for him? Like, oh, your father thought we should start with the personal stuff before we got into the business. And like, oh, do you understand what he's offering? It's an opportunity to like reset your personal and business relationship. It's like she wanted to convey the ideas he's too much of a hard ass to say. So I do think this was a ploy and a play to get them to go through with the Gojo deal. The Gojo deal is still all beneficial to all of them. And I also think he genuinely wanted to connect with his kids. Like when Shiv says, like, well, you helped Tom, do the divorce lawyer thing. And he's like, well, you weren't talking to me. If you had come to me and you ask me for advice, I'd have told you to do the exact same thing. And I believe him in that moment. I do think he's being authentic. I do think that if they were not talking to him and she did say, you know, I'm dealing with this time shit, I don't know what to do, he probably would have told her that. But, you know, I that's what I love about this show is ambiguity, and it particularly as it pertains to motivations. And I don't really know how Logan really feels. I just know that I like not knowing, and I like feeling like I have such a deep understanding of this character that I know to look beyond just the surface level. And I think that's so fucking cool to watch a show and be able to feel like that. Like, you know the character so well. Think of this scene. Think of the karaoke scene, right? You got Logan in there, Kendall, Roman, Shiv, Connor. We know these people so well that everything they're saying, it's like you know what's being unsaid in there. You know how everyone feels, even if it's different from what they really said. Roman's behavior, like when Kendall's like, apologize for hitting Roman, and Roman's like, everybody hits me, I'm a piece of shit, or whatever he said. It's like, that's Roman, that's how he does, but you know that's a thing, right? That's why Roman is the way he is. Kendall's whole thing, like Kendall not even mentioning that he knows Matsson's gonna walk, like all of that underlying unspoken shit, that's what I love about this show, and that's why I love that I don't know what Logan's goal is, I don't know what his plan is, but I like the idea that we could theorize about his authenticity in that moment. And no one's right, no one's wrong, but the fact that we can play around with it, even when there's like direct things that are being said that are supposed to inform us of everyone's motivations. We know these characters well enough to know that what they say is not necessarily reality, and I think that's so fucking cool. A couple of thoughts before I close out. The Carrie audition tape. I don't want to talk about the tape itself, but I do want to talk about the scene where Logan convinces Tom to tell Carrie she can't be an anchor only by using facial expressions. We had this scene earlier where Logan walks in on Jerry and Hugo laughing at the tape. And earlier, he had asked Tom and Sid their opinion on it. Well, in this scene with Tom, after he tells Greg to fuck off, he kind of gives Tom a like, are you sure that's the right answer? Like, raised eyebrow after he asked Tom again. Like, he asked Tom again, I want to talk about Carrie. And Tom's like, oh yeah, you know, really excited, ready to do this. And he kind of like makes this angry face that kind of like raises an eyebrow. Like, are you sure that's what you want to say? And as Tom slowly comes to the realization of like, I'm molding my response to fit Logan's demeanor, you see Logan's face like transition. Like he goes from like the raised eyebrow, kind of angry looking, like, I don't know about that, to like a more neutral, and then it's like he starts calling Tom smart. He's like, oh, smart. I'm like, he's doing this perfect. Like he's pushing Tom in the direction that I think he wants to go. And after Tom lands at Mary, baby Carrie ain't ready, he's just like, oh, okay. He doesn't even say you gotta tell her she ain't ready. He just goes, like, you know what you gotta do, right? Tom's like, yeah. I just love that scene, man, because again, what they do with what's unsaid. Everything Logan said didn't matter. It was all about the face. Watch the face. It's great. I also love the scene where Greg talks to Carrie. You know, after Tom kicks that job over to Greg then talks to Carrie. Lots of great Greg quotes in that scene. Just a great scene overall. But I also loved Carrie's closing line where she's like, there's no focus group, I'm going to pull you apart like string cheese. I thought that was a really great line. I love the scene with Logan's speech on the ATN floor. I thought that was just a great Brian Cox moment. He just got to go full Brian Cox. I also loved how Greg described Logan walking the floor as Jaws, but if everybody in Jaws worked for Jaws. I thought that was way better than the Hitman Santa Claus line. But like, if you didn't hear that line and then envision like a bunch of like sharks in an office setting wearing suits and like typing on computers with fins, what are you even doing? Like, and I'm just like, everybody in Jaws worked for Jaws. Like, I'm just envisioning like Jaws in a suit walking the floor. Like, I don't know. It was just great. I gotta trim my mustache down. It's like tickling my nose. Why can't Jerry come to visit Matsson the next day, but all the men can? I don't know. It didn't seem like a gender thing, but it seemed like a Jerry thing. But I don't know why. I don't know why would he have something against Jerry, like Jerry specifically, that he wouldn't have against, say, Hugo or Carl or anybody. I really liked. So in the karaoke scene, which is again just replete with great moments, when it ultimately comes to light that Carrie isn't going to be getting an anchor job, and Kendall and Shiv kind of like give her shit for it, but then Kendall says, Shiv says something like, "Has it happened yet? Has he fucked you yet?" or something like that, and then Kendall goes, "That'll happen, the fucking." He's like, "But congrats on losing your betrayal, Cherry." What a great line, man. I love that line. It's such a good line. I can't even explain why I like it so much, but shout out to whoever wrote that. I just thought it was really good. And then lastly, next week should slap. Connor's wedding next week. The meeting with Mattson next week. There's supposedly a 30-minute one-shot next week. So lots of good stuff to look forward to next week. So let me know what you thought about this episode. Let me know what you thought about the ambiguity. Let me know what you think about the motivations. And I will see you guys next week for episode 3. And until then, peace.